You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today I've got some great guests. We start with a documentary producer talking about her new film on how video, when it was first introduced, became an influence on feminism and vice versa. Then we speak with the author of a delicious new book about, among other things, her own life and her life as a romantic feminist. And last we speak with the great three-term former governor of Vermont, who herself was opposed by, but won against, Bernie Sanders. But first we need to go inside the headlines. You know, feminism has a permanent residence inside the headlines. It's there in virtually every story and every headline, although usually assiduously ignored even by the writer of the story. So I want to unearth just a few examples drawn from inside current headlines. Matthew McWilliams of Politico has reported on a new study that I've mentioned before on this program, one done on a cross-section of supporters of Donald Trump. The findings are eye-opening, but won't surprise feminists. The sole consistency among Trump supporters, across age, religion, including evangelical, level of education, geography, class and income level, etc., the sole consistency among Trump supporters is a reliance on authoritarianism in the family. When asked questions about child raising, for instance, which would you prefer, a child who's curious or well-mannered, self-reliant or obedient? A Trump supporter will always opt for well-mannered and obedient. This finding is now being reported, but without mentioning that for decades feminists have been saying the patriarchal family is the microcosm of the patriarchal state. Another example. A recent New York Times story reported on the practice of Daesh or ISIL regarding the women they capture and enslave as sexual property. Although Daesh claims it's resurrecting a traditional Islamic practice from the Middle Ages, they resort to the very modern use of contraceptives, which they force the women to use, and they even force abortion, for two reasons. First, because they've discovered that their fighters, to whom the women are given as rewards, are less eager for martyrdom when they become fathers. But the second and even more important reason is that Sharia law forbids a man to have sex with a slave if she may be pregnant by another man. You're supposed to wait until she's given birth. This is to ensure paternity, which in turn means which guy owns the child. So since you can't rape her if she's pregnant and you want to be able to sell and resell her again and again, it's crucial that she not conceive. Contrast this with what some may have forgotten, the so-called ethnic cleansing carried out against Bosnian Muslim women during the wars in Yugoslavia in the late 1980s and early 1990s. In that case, the aim of the Slavic and Croatian men was deliberately to impregnate the women of their enemy, thus creating an entire generation of themselves via the bodies of the women of their enemies, ethnic cleansing. In both these cases, as feminists have been pointing out for decades, patrimony was the obsessive point. One last example of what could be many more. Senator Bernie Sanders rather refreshingly acknowledged that he is a one-issue candidate in that he focuses on income inequality, even if that means that he sometimes skims when touching all the other bases of race, sex, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation or choice, and so forth. But for someone whose focus is income inequality, Sanders interestingly never points out that equal pay for women would be the single most revolutionary element in a reformed economy, not only in simple fairness and in sheer numbers, that is, half the population, but also in that women as consumers put more money back circulating in the economy, and that when you raise a woman's salary, it changes the economics for the entire family and, by extension, community. Try this inside the headlines game yourself. As you read through the newspaper or watch the news on television, look for the buried inherent sexism, whether the story mentions women or not, and look for the buried inside the headlines issue about the centrality of feminism to solving the very problem the story purports to be about. And now it's time for my first guest. Jenny Raskin is a documentary producer, director, and writer whose work has been broadcast on PBS, the National Geographic Channel, the Sundance Channel, and the Discovery Channel. And she's here to talk about her new film, Here Come the Video Freaks. Here's Jenny Raskin. Jenny Raskin, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. I remember Video Freaks, but back when in the Pleistocene era, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and when it was a sign of enormous importance and history creating and history recording. But tell some of our younger listeners what Video Freaks was and what Here Come the Video Freaks, this wonderful film, is.
Sure. Well, I didn't know about the Video Freaks until I met one of them at a screening quite a few years ago now, about 10 years ago, and it was a screening about a film unrelated, and he liked the film, so he asked my partner and I if we wanted to grab a beer afterward, and we just sat down with him, and he told us the story of this incredible collective that he had been part of in the late 60s and 70s, and both of us just felt that the story was amazing, and if the tapes that they shot were still in a condition that they could be used, there could be a film. Mm-hmm. And, in a nutshell, the story that he told us was that this group of people came together in 1969, right after the invention of the first portable video camera, the Portapak, made by Sony, just kind of in love with this new medium. It was really, it's hard, I think, for younger people now to understand what a breakthrough it was for journalists, or for that matter, just anybody, to pick up a camera, film something, and play it back immediately.
Right.
For the people that they had just filmed.
Without developing film.
Without developing it, right.
Yeah.
You film, you waited at the lab, you sent it to the lab, you waited many weeks, and this was, this just really broke down the barrier between the person filming and the subject. They could turn it around and show it to them and interact with them, and it really changed the. So this group of people came together as a collective, and their first project was actually for CBS News. A sort of forward-thinking executive named Don West there had heard about video as a medium and thought that it could be used to create a new kind of television that would cover the counterculture and the movements of the time. And he through somebody, a hippie that worked in the mailroom at CBS, he connected with the Video Freaks, who were at that point just a few of them, and they grew to about 10 people, and CBS bankrolled them to shoot a pilot, which they went around in an RV around the country shooting. They filmed with Abby Hoffman. They filmed with Black Panther Fred Hampton just a few weeks before he was killed by the police. They filmed tons of just education stuff, environmental stuff, women's stuff, and put it together in a pilot that CBS really did not get and did not appreciate in any way, shape, or form. So with that, they also, CBS saw no value in the equipment, so they were able to keep it all and stay together as a collective, and they continued to work in various capacities for another 7 or 8 years, completely living together, first in a loft in Soho in New York, and then eventually, after kind of running out of money in New York and feeling a little unsure about what they would do with all the material that they were filming, they relocated to upstate New York to a farmhouse in the Catskills, tiny farming town. They were really out of place when they first moved there, but they had this incredible idea of creating a pirate television station for the town, which had no television reception, so they had no entertainment, and that really won over the town, and it became an incredible collaboration and kind of a model for community media.
Right. And at what point did women make their presence known in Video Freaks? Mm-hmm. They began shooting and directing their own pieces.
Yeah, that was one of the most fascinating things for me as a slightly younger person coming to the story.
Right.
Was that they really came to it at the same time as the men in the group because nobody knew how to use the equipment. They together explored this new medium and learned how to use the equipment and kind of each of them created their own artistic point of view for the pieces that they directed. And, all of the different people in the group, women and men, played different roles at different times. Mm-hmm. And some of the pieces were more collective and some were more director-driven. But the women really felt like it was accessible to them. This medium was accessible to them in a different way. And then they spent a lot of, they covered all kinds of things. The women's club covered all the same issues that the men did, but they did, I think, do some really special coverage of the women's movement that was unfolding at that time as well, in a very different way than most of the footage you might see of the women's movement because it was video.
Right, exactly. And in fact, that's what I remember. And it's so interesting because I think had the foment about the beginning of the current contemporary wave of feminism in this country not been happening at that exact same time, I think probably what would have happened is what has happened historically, which is that a new technology comes along and men glom onto it and women are kept out of it. But in this case, there was all this feminism erupting left, right, and center. And so the women, it probably affected the women in terms of Video Freaks as well. My God, now, in your smartphone, you can take videos. But at that point, the Portapacks were big stuff. I mean, they were heavy things. I remember those women, some of them my height, 5 feet, just lugging around these huge video cameras, video pack things, that still were lighter than film cameras, but were pretty damn heavy, and just slinging them around and filming every women's demonstration and getting busted along with the rest of us. And those women just live in my heart.
Yeah, no, and the coverage was really different, because obviously it was women telling the story, and they had the ability to tell some. And yes, I mean, especially. I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie, but some of the counter-protest scenes that they captured of the men that were, oh my God, I mean, that was shocking to me. I really never seen that kind of material. I think, the news cameras didn't really focus on it as much, and it was mostly the point of view that they were bringing to it. Right up there with those men, along with the women that were, debating, arguing, and really getting into it with them.
Tell our listeners how people can, I know it's playing in some theaters, but how you can find out where it is near you. You can go to the website, which is, go ahead, take it away.
It is videofreaks.com, videofreaksfilm.com, which is VIDEOFREEX. film.com. And we have a screening page on there with all of our upcoming screenings listed, and also if anybody's interested in arranging a screening or works at a university, we're really hoping that this film reaches younger audiences. That's our primary goal. We know we have a built-in audience with people that experienced that time, and because video is such an immediate kind of medium, it really brings people back. Right. But we also want to bring people that have not been there
exactly
back to that time and experience it.
Exactly. Thank you so much for making the film, Jenny, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have to take a short break here. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, and we'll be back in just a moment to find out just what is the definition of a romantic feminist. Maybe you are one. Stick around and find out.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Alida Brill is the author of a number of books, including Dancing at the River's Edge, A Patient and Her Doctor Negotiate Life with Chronic Illness, and also Nobody's Business, The Paradoxes of Privacy. And she's the editor of A Rising Public Voice, Women in Politics Worldwide. But her new book that she's here to talk about today is Dear Princess Grace, Dear Betty, The Memoir of a Romantic Feminist. Alida Brill. Alida, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Robin. It's a delight.
A delight right back at you. Listen, full disclosure, listeners, this is a friend, and it is this new book of hers, because she's, as I said in the intro, written other books before. This new book of hers, I gave a blurb to, not because she's a friend, but because it's such a terrific book. And I think I said in the blurb something, I don't have it in front of me, but something along the lines of that this was not only a personal memoir, but it was a memoir of the women's movement in a very real sense. And it was filled with such delicious gossip about Betty Friedan and so many others that you could call reading it a guilty pleasure, except for the fact that it's so damn well written that it takes the guilt away and makes it a pure pleasure. So congratulations on Dear Princess Grace, Dear Betty, the Memoir of a Romantic Feminist. Congratulations, Alida.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much.
It's really a very, very lovely, delicious, yummy of a book. So the subtitle is The Memoir of a Romantic Feminist. I think, since I once referred to myself as a feminist romantic, which is sort of the same thing, I think I know what that means. But tell us what a romantic feminist is.
Well, it starts out by trying to get people's attention, to be completely frank. What it means is that you can care about love and even romance and still be a feminist and still find ways to love and to be loved without giving up or compromising your feminist principles, ideals, and ways of living and being. And the notion that romantic feminists seems not to belong together in the subtitle is the very reason I put them together.
Exactly. The stereotypes of feminists, not caring about love, not caring about humor, for that matter. You know, as we know, feminists have no sense of humor.
Oh no, we have no humor, none at all.
We would have killed ourselves if we had no sense of humor. And the Princess Grace and Dear Betty being Betty Friedan, that balance is very interesting, because the Princess Grace romanticism and her being held up as an ideal with a prince and a movie star and everything that every little girl should want, that affected your childhood, but then Betty came in and affected your growing adulthood, right?
Well, Betty also affected my childhood because the book, as my mother called it, the book, The Feminine Mystique, was published when I was 13, and she read it. It was her book, not mine, and it literally changed my mother's life, or renewed my mother's life. She had been a working woman and then wasn't. And when that book came out, it spoke to her, although the community we lived in was certainly not the community Betty lived in. It was much lower socioeconomic than the community that Betty was writing from when she wrote her book. But it was in many ways as if Friedan had written a personal letter to my mother. And then years later, when I was about 30 and moved to New York City, I met Friedan, and we became extremely close friends and remained so until her death. The Princess Grace, of course, is that I was a little girl who wanted nothing more than to be a princess bride and an actress. And I wrote Princess Grace using a bit of a fib to my mother, who helped me, and Princess Grace wrote back. And so that was sheer romanticism, no feminism, and it progresses.
I mean, I had my own, as every feminist of a certain generation did, my own skirmishes with Betty, and yet could admire the work that she had done. She was a how shall we put it, high maintenance person to know.
Oh, I think that's a kind remark. Thank you for that, because that indeed she was.
But your depiction of her is so fair and balanced in a real way, not Fox News, in a fair and balanced and compassionate, that it brings that out even in me. It's a whole side of Friedan that we never got to see, and I'm so grateful that you've put it down on paper to add to the canon.
Well, I think at one point in the book I say very simply, I knew a different Betty. Mm-hmm. And I knew a different Betty for the reasons one does when one becomes extremely intimate with a very public figure. But I also knew a different Betty because we shared something. We both suffered from, and I still do, from chronic illness. She from a sometimes debilitating asthma. And I have a form of lupus. It's called Wegener's, but it's also often respiratory based. So we shared illness, and we shared chronic illness, and we shared the deception of it because we both tried to hide it. A little hard when you're choking and spitting and trying to give speeches and things. But she, I think, hid it more successfully than I did. But surely that bond of chronic illness was an enormous part of our deep friendship.
Right. And your feminism.
And our feminism, absolutely.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because when I first met you, I knew of you as a sort of public intellectual and a social critic. I think you published a lot of books about women's rights and
civil rights and civil liberties.
And civil liberties, precisely. And you have continued to do that, but then you also became known as a spokesperson for women with chronic illness because of you've written so tellingly about that. And now you're going to be known as a feminist romantic.
Oh, and aren't they all really of one piece?
Of course they are. Absolutely they are. But this is so candid and so honest. I mean, from the suburban community that you grew up in Lakewood, California, and the effect, it really speaks for a whole generation of women who came to consciousness as the movement was coming to consciousness, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and also I think that in that community, Lakewood, California, the dream community, tomorrow, city today was its motto. I saw such sadness in so many women, so many mothers, not just my own. I saw their sadness. I couldn't escape that they were sad. They were sad mommies. I only knew two women in that entire community who were professionals, one or worked. One was the woman next door who was a nurse, who was an RN, and another woman who was a teacher. There were women in the community who worked, obviously, but it was not the way the community was planned. Women were to stay home. Daddies had, the mommy-daddy thing.
Right.
Fathers had conquered the Nazi terror and the horror in Asia, and their reward was a planned community and job, presumably for life. Aerospace ran Lakewood, and women were to be delightfully happy in their garden community. Actually, they were miserable.
Right. And of course, they were also working. They just weren't
employed. They were working like dogs.
They weren't employed. That's the difference.
Oh, they were working like dogs inside the home, and this is before there was a concept of things like dishwashers, although, a lot of the work on housework saving devices say it simply takes more work to use this stuff. But with the exception of the garbage disposal, every house had a garbage disposal, and it advertised itself as the world's first garbage-free community. Women were, honest to God, it's in the brochures, women worked so hard at home, and it was work that was underappreciated, undervalued. And so there you are working, and it was a community where people had more than lots of children, many 3, 4 kids and more. You felt exhausted and worthless at the end of the day. It was the dream entrapment, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you sure got out and made tracks. I mean, partly because your parents were liberal and intelligent and gave you the right and the space to do so.
And they were other, Robin. They were profoundly eccentric and other.
Right.
They didn't fit in. Fingers were pointed at them. Things were said behind their backs. And I think in so many ways that was what liberated all three of us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there was a great high school teacher who encouraged you, but mostly your own pluck. Anyway, the book is wonderful. It's called Dear Princess Grace, Dear Betty, the memoir of a romantic feminist. It's available now. And there are readings coming up, aren't there?
Yes.
Where are those? And
first one is April 7th downtown at Blue Stockings.
Okay, that's in New York City.
That's downtown and at the wonderful Blue Stockings bookstore. And then on the 25th of April, on the Upper West Side, Barnes & Noble at 7 o'clock, there will be another reading. Okay,
so April 7th and at Blue Stockings in Manhattan, and April 25th at Barnes & Noble uptown.
82nd and Broadway.
82nd and Broadway. And also I can tell you that she's a very good reader, very dramatic and very funny person in the best witty sense. So, Dear Princess Grace, Dear Betty, the memoir of a romantic feminist, Alida Brill, that's Alida Brill. Thank you, my dear, for this book, and thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
And now, from the sublime to the ridiculous, it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Who Talks is a project of Gender Avenger in partnership with the Center for American Women in Politics and the Women's Media Center. And it is based on statistics analyzing those who talk about the U.S. 2016 presidential election, tracking cable TV news shows and their analysts by gender. And as you might expect, sorry to be the bringer of this news, but, well, here's a weekly roundup, for example. The morning shows, male analysts 84, female analysts 34. Prime time shows like Anderson Cooper 360, male analysts of the election 48, female analysts 46. That's at least close. Fox and Friends, male analysts 51, female analysts 8%. Morning Joe, 17% only female, 83% male analysts on the election. And even, break my heart, Rachel Maddow, 33% female analysts, 67% male analysts. And the statistics about Who Talks are, you guessed it, surreal. Time for another break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back speaking with the first woman in U.S. history to be elected governor of her state, not once, but 3 times. And one of those times she was opposed, but won over Bernie Sanders. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Governor Madeleine Kunin was the 77th governor of Vermont 3 times. She also served as U.S. ambassador to Switzerland. She was Vermont's first and to date only female governor, as well as being the first Jewish governor of Vermont. In fact, she was the first Jewish woman to be elected governor of any U.S. state. And she's the first woman in U.S. history to be elected governor of her state 3 times. As governor, she focused on environment, education, children's issues, strong feminism. She appointed the first woman to the state Supreme Court and created the family court system. She would have been elected governor a 4th time, but she declined to seek re-election in 1990, and she is currently a James Marsh Professor at Large at the University of Vermont. Governor Madeleine Kunin. Governor Kunin, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's an honor to have you here. I've watched your career for many years and been so glad that we're on the same side.
Oh, yes.
You recently wrote a wonderful piece in the Boston Globe, which in fact some weeks ago I quoted on this program, about the fact that Hillary Clinton is not the first progressive Democratic woman to be challenged by Bernie Sanders. And you told the story of his running against you in 1986 when you were running for your second term, and that you were this, yourself wild-eyed progressive feminist. But of course, as far as he was concerned, he didn't care even if he split the electorate so that a Republican might win, because as far as he was concerned, the Republicans and Democrats were all alike. Fortunately, the voters didn't agree. You got reelected. But your insights into that campaign were so interesting. Share some of them, please, with our listeners.
Well, it was an interesting campaign because I had Bernie Sanders on my left and Peter Smith, the Republican, on my right. And in the end, I won. He got 14% of the vote, and I actually served 3 terms as governor.
Right.
But one of the things that I found hard to swallow was when he claimed to be a better feminist than I was. And and of course I'd been a feminist all my adult life. But I was reminded the other day by my former chief of staff that one reason he ran against me was that I didn't raise the income tax as he had proposed. And he was really singing the same song he is today about income inequality. At that time, it was not heard by many people. So I do give him credit for raising a national awareness of income inequality. And of course, it resonates so much more today than it did in 1986 because the situation has gotten worse. But I don't disagree with his message. I just disagree with whether he can actually get it done. He's a great orator and inspires many people to get involved in politics, which is a good thing. But even then, I questioned how could he govern? Does he have the temperament? Does he have the know-how to actually follow through on his promises?
The being more feminist than thou from a guy always makes me a little bit crazy, just a little bit frothing at the mouth here. But you're, my God, your first priority as governor, if I'm recalling correctly, was universal access to kindergarten. Your maiden speech, forgive this term, but that's the term of art, on the floor of the Vermont House was for pro-ERA, which of course is coming around again now, and that you set a record for a Vermont governor's appointees. Women filled half your cabinet. And Hillary's staff today is over 50% female. His campaign began with a predominantly male inner circle and continues to face accusation of keeping women out of the top ranks. What is it about some gentlemen who think they get women when they don't?
Well, it's interesting. Of course, we've had men advocates for women's issues like, child care and equal pay. But there's a big difference between being a surrogate for women and for women themselves to be at the table and tell their stories and give a sense of urgency to these issues, which someone who hasn't been there, of course now there are fathers who are interested in paid maternity and sick leave, but it's still not the same. No. Because when you've lived it, when you've gone through the experience of being a new parent and having to choose between going back to work after 2 weeks or even 1 week, or being able to be home with your child for at least 6 weeks, I mean that's a minimum. I was talking to a woman who had her first child in Bulgaria, and she got 14 months off with her first child, and the interesting thing is that American businesses who do work in other countries that have paid maternity leave still make money, whereas if they would have those same policies here, like paid maternity leave, they scream and say unfair. This will
Crash
cause us to lose money and having
right.
to fire people. So women have to be at the table.
Yeah.
And there's an expression that I've sometimes used, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And there is some truth to that.
There's a lot of truth to that. A lot.
We have to tell our own stories in our own voices.
Well, what interests me is that, I think basically Bernie has a class analysis. Not even New Left. I came out of the New Left years ago before I was a feminist 24/7. But this is not even New Left. This is Old Left, in which quote unquote women's issues are considered a distraction or divisive. And yet if people have similar positions, let's say a man and a woman in this situation, and are equally qualified, although I would argue that Hillary is infinitely more qualified. But
I totally agree.
Never mind that for the moment. But let's say they're equally qualified. Then he is urging voters not to vote for her because or you years ago because you were a woman. He said that would be sexist. Actually, there's a name for that, not sexism. There's a name for when people are equally qualified. But one is of a disadvantaged group, and the name for it is affirmative action. So has he not heard of affirmative action? Or are we up against a situation where young people, some young people, consider the battle won, and don't understand how different a female president, or for that matter, a governor in your case, would be or was from men?
Yes. I think they haven't had the experience yet of facing discrimination. At least many of them have not. And frankly, they may not know the history of the whole suffrage movement.
Yeah.
So I think women in my age and somewhat younger, that's been part of our heritage, and our whole ambition has been to see a female president. And Hillary epitomizes that dream. And we're living in a very strange political time when experience is considered a liability.
Yeah.
Of course, you wouldn't go to your surgeon who was inexperienced, but you're ready to go and have the President of the United States be inexperienced in a very dangerous time.
Terrifying.
The whole Middle East, the terrorist threat. Hillary personifies that wonderful quality of having been there and being able to pick up the phone and call the premier of China or Vladimir Putin and have a conversation because they understand each other through long associations. But what's surprised when a lot of young people, not all, of course, think the battle is over and won. Don't recognize that it's still tougher for a woman to run for president. There's no difference now for women or men running for the Congress or for state legislatures. It's a little tougher for governor because it's an executive position.
Yep.
But when you get to the apex of the political system, the presidency, women just have to carry a lot of baggage, no matter who they are, and that suitcase gets heavy.
Yeah.
For example, it sounds superficial, but it's so true. What she wears, her hairstyle, what her appearance is at the podium, what her body language is at the podium.
I know.
When she shouts or raises her voice, I haven't actually heard her shouting.
No, and he shouts all the time. He
even got laryngitis. And also, when women make a mistake, and studies have shown this, they are punished more severely than men. Look at the mistakes Donald Trump made, but nobody says that he can't be trusted.
Right.
Hillary made a mistake with the emails and how she handled them, but those keep coming up
I know.
as some kind of felony. It's outrageous how she is being singled out. And of course, the whole issue was raised by the Republican investigators, and hopefully it'll be settled soon. But it's blown way out of proportion.
Well, this criticism that she is not authentic. I mean, no matter which way, you can't win for losing because she's too political or she's not political enough or, she's the Wicked Witch of the West. But you wrote very tellingly, very insightfully about this thing about authenticity and the different standards about for men and women, that he can run as the ultimate outsider, but she can't, even though there has never been a woman president, and he is, after all, another white man. But the complexity that she's trying to get across as a policy wonk in a campaign where rhetoric is flying around, does that work against her?
Well, I think you're right, where it's a sort of two-edged sword. She has to be tough enough and macho enough to be commander-in-chief, and she's managed that very well, both 4 years ago and now. But she also has to be feminine enough to be authentic as a woman. And when a woman vies for a role that has traditionally been held by men, she just has a higher burden of proof that she's genuine. Because, we see male leaders, we've been brought up on male leaders, and women can have gender bias as much as men.
Yeah.
Not quite, maybe, but women are guilty of that too, probably subconsciously,
right.
Because they don't even recognize it. But when we criticize a woman for a tone of voice, we expect her to be absolutely perfect. Because she is new. We figure she's really going to clean up the system. That's our first hope. But then when she's a politician and plays by the rules that politics over the centuries has laid down, we don't like that either.
Right.
So you train for running for president by working your way up the system. At least that's how most people do. Of course, we see exceptions today in Donald Trump, a huge exception. But she's done that. She's gone to school, in the school of politics, so that to prepare herself, either knowingly or unknowingly, for the presidency.
Right.
But then we say that's no good. That's false. You should. If she went in the other direction and was totally new to the system and decided to run for president, she'd be heavily criticized too.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a no-win. But so how do we win a no-win?
Well, I think we win by enabling her to really be herself, by listening to her, by not being swept up by the criticism, and by really saying, we want a president who can lead us safely through the next 4 or 8 years, and concentrate on what she is saying and promising, and concentrate on saying, well, which person will keep us safe? Which candidate understands climate change and the urgency of that and has had experience? Which candidate will work for women and families? And she has a much broader agenda than Bernie Sanders.
Yes, I know.
There are many roads to Rome, and Rome being the level of notorious income inequality in the United States. One way to address that, and it's a very important way, is to enable women to stay in the workforce.
Yeah.
And how do you enable that? You enable that by having affordable childcare, quality childcare, by paid sick days, which we just enacted in the state of Vermont, and by equal pay for equal work. Because when a woman works, the family's income obviously rises.
Particularly if we get equal pay for women.
Right. And so that's a very deep-felt issue for Hillary. I mean, it's on Bernie's list, but it's not the same.
Well, as you
it is for Hillary, who's worked on these issues all of her public life.
Right, and as you pointed out again in this terrific Boston Globe piece, the difference is even if men will protest, I believe the same thing. I'm a feminist too. Whatever. The difference is how they rank these issues on the agenda.
Exactly.
Are they priorities, or are they somewhere down on the list because we just touch that base and move on? And with her,
I learned that in the Vermont legislature. I learned that as governor. I mean, where do you spend your political capital? You only have so much. And for my observation as both a state legislator and a governor, you have to put these issues first. You have to fight for them every day and recognize their importance. And I'm certain because of her gender and because of her life experience and her empathy with working women, low-wage workers, for whom these policies are critical, she will be a much more effective president.
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing that in the response from people who have had some experience in the world, from the Black community, from the Latino community, from the disabled community, from the gay and lesbian, from everybody who is not largely white men and some young white women. So I tend to say I'm not voting for her because she's a woman, but because I am a woman. And so that's how
that's a good answer.
That's how,
you know, we shouldn't have to answer that question when I think about it. When men vote for a man, you don't ask him, are you just voting for him because he's a man?
Exactly.
That question doesn't even get asked.
Maybe we should start.
Why do women have to justify voting for a woman? We're voting for her because she's the best candidate to be our president.
Oh, listen, Madeleine, you've come across a great idea. I think we should start a campaign asking men, are you voting for so-and-so because he's a man? And just turn it around and say, I don't think we should vote for somebody just because he's a man. Do you? And turn it around, because at the very minimum, it's a consciousness raiser. That question.
Right.
Right. Oh, thank you. You're wonderful as always. Thank you so much for everything you have done and that you continue to do. And thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Now it's time for some good news in our new little feature, We Won This. The rate of unintended pregnancy in the United States has declined to its lowest level in the last 3 decades. A recent analysis in the New England Journal of Medicine found variations in rates of unintended pregnancy by income, race, ethnicity, education, and age, but there were declines, some quite large, in almost every demographic group. The rate among teenagers, for example, declined by 28%. The rate of all income groups dropped, with the largest decrease, 32%, among people with incomes at 100% to 199% of the poverty level. The rate fell 28% among women who had not graduated from high school, 2% among high school graduates, 16% among women who had attended some college, and 14% among college grads. The rate for non-Hispanic whites and blacks went down 13% and 15% respectively, and the figure among Hispanics declined by 26%. Among religious groups, evangelical Protestants had the largest decline in unintended pregnancies. Wow, 27%. Mainline Protestants, Roman Catholics, and the category, quote, other religions also had lower rates. Among women without religious affiliation, the rate of unintended pregnancy declined by 26%. Still, 81% of pregnancies among women who were cohabiting were unintended in 2011, as were 75% of teenage pregnancies, 60% of those among women living below the poverty line, 50% of pregnancies among Hispanics, and 64% among non-Hispanic blacks. The authors of the new analysis, which comes out of the Guttmacher Institute, concluded that it was unlikely that alterations in sexual behavior or fluctuations in the composition of the population could explain the numbers. They feel strongly that changes in contraceptive use are driving the decline, particularly a substantial shift toward the use of long-acting methods of contraception. So, hey there, we won this. Time for one last pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll return immediately with some fighting words. Stay with us.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to some fighting words. The mob murder of a woman named Farkhunda in Afghanistan on March 19th last year became a worldwide cause célèbre. She had been accused by the custodian of a mosque of burning a Quran, and the mob set on her, stoned her to death, cars ran over her. It was an atrocity. It turned out that rather than burning the Quran, she had been working to defend it. She was an Islamic scholar who was upset by all of the shady and corrupt goings-on at the mosque, which is one of Kabul's most popular shrines. These included an un-Islamic practice of fortune-telling and the selling of amulets, as well as allegations of pimping and prostitution. 19 of the people arrested in connection with her death were police officers accused of failing to intervene to save her. Most of the police were given token penalties, such as pay reductions or cancellation of leave time while on duty. 30 other cases were prosecuted, but 17 of those were dismissed by an appeals court. In the remaining 13 cases, the appeals court recommended the reduction of sentences, leading lawyers representing the victim's family to appeal to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court finally, on International Women's Day, could you believe it, confirmed the decision to vacate the central 4 death sentences, plus 9 other defendants who also had their sentences reduced. One of the defendants whose death sentence was nullified was the custodian of the holy shrine, who trafficked in Viagra, condoms, and pagan amulets, and who was the one who falsely accused Farkhunda of burning the Quran. Another was an employee from an optician's shop who joined a growing mob at the shrine and who pummeled her with a rock the size of a watermelon. A third was an Afghan intelligence agent who bragged on Facebook that he had the honor of striking the fatal blow against her. And another was a man who drove his car over her twice. When these guys were sentenced to death last year, and I am against the death sentence no matter what the circumstances, but they were sentenced to death, and Afghan women looked on it as a rare moment of justice for Afghan women. And other convictions seemed imminent, but in the months afterwards, failures at every stage of the justice process surfaced. And now the Supreme Court has confirmed the decision to vacate the death sentences and to lower the sentences of 9 other defendants. The family of the murdered woman is asking the Supreme Court to reconsider its decision, and their lawyers are lodging a petition within the next 2 months. This is an obscenity following on an atrocity. This was the case where, at her funeral, women came forth and carried the coffin, which is forbidden in Afghanistan. And they did it anyway, and they wouldn't let men anywhere near her burial, her funeral, or her body. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.